The morning I noticed something was wrong, the house was completely quiet. It was a Tuesday in early October, and I was standing in the bathroom getting ready for work when my fingers brushed against something on the left side of my abdomen just below my ribs. A firmness. A pressure that shouldn't have been there. I pressed again, slowly, telling myself it was nothing. A muscle. Gas. Something I'd eaten. But it didn't move the way those things move. It sat there, dense and stubborn, like a stone hidden under skin. I stood in front of that mirror for a long time. The kind of long where you stop seeing your own face and just stare at a stranger. I was 28 years old. I had a full-time job at a logistics company in Columbus, Ohio. I paid my own bills, filed my own taxes, made my own coffee every morning in a kitchen I shared with my husband and our cat. I was not the kind of person who panicked about her body. I didn't catastrophize. I didn't spiral. But I knew something was wrong. I knew it the way you sometimes know things before you have words for them. I told my husband that evening. We were eating dinner pasta, nothing special, and I set down my fork and said, "I found something. On my side. I need to get it checked out." He looked up from his plate. "What kind of something? A lump? Maybe a cyst? I don't know." He nodded slowly and said we'd call the doctor in the morning. He wasn't dismissive about it. He was calm in the way he always was, steady and measured, and I was grateful for that. I held onto his calm like a rope. What I didn't know yet was that the next 7 months would ask me to hold on much tighter than that. My primary care doctor referred me to a gastroenterologist after feeling the mass herself. She didn't say the word I was quietly afraid of. She just said it needed imaging, and she used a tone that made me understand this was not optional, not precautionary. This was necessary. The appointment for an abdominal ultrasound was scheduled for 2 weeks out. I wrote the date on the small calendar I kept on the refrigerator, November 4th. I circled it twice. I made the mistake of telling my mother. I say mistake not because I didn't love her. I say it because I didn't yet understand the specific way her love had always come attached to something else. Control, fear, the need to manage how our family looked to the outside world. I had spent most of my adult life trying to separate those things in my mind, trying to believe that one could exist without the other, that she could love me and still let me be. I called her on a Wednesday afternoon, sitting in my car in the parking garage at work. I told her what my doctor had said. I told her about the ultrasound. There was a pause. "Are you sure you're not just stressed?" she said. "You've always been sensitive to stress. Your body does things when you're anxious." I told her I was not anxious. I told her my doctor had physically felt the mass. "Doctors feel things all the time," she said. "Then they run tests and charge you $1,000, and it turns out to be nothing. You remember what happened with your cousin?" She went in for a scan, and they told her she had a polyp, and it cost her $600 just for them to say, "It's benign, go home." I said this was different. "You don't know that yet," she said. "You're jumping ahead." I hung up thinking she was probably right. That is what I am ashamed of now, how easy it still was, after all those years, for her voice to reach inside me and rearrange things. The ultrasound happened on schedule. I went alone because my husband had a work commitment he couldn't move, and I told him it was fine, I could handle it. The technician was professional and quiet, and I stared at the ceiling tiles while she moved the wand across my side, and I thought about nothing at all, which is a skill I had developed over many years of waiting rooms. 3 days later, my doctor called. The ultrasound had shown a solid mass, approximately 4 centimeters. She was referring me to an oncologist. She said the word carefully, the way people say words they know carry weight. She said this did not mean it was cancer. She said it meant we needed to understand what we were dealing with. I sat on the edge of my bed after the call and looked at the wall. My husband came in and sat beside me and held my hand and didn't say anything for a while, which was exactly right. I called my mother again. I don't know why I kept calling her. I think I still believed, on some level, that she would eventually say the right thing, that the right circumstances would unlock something softer in her. "An oncologist," she said. "That seems extreme." I told her that's where my doctor referred me. "Your doctor is being overly cautious." "They do that. It's a liability thing. They refer everyone." "Mom, it's 4 centimeters. Did she say it was cancer?" No, but then let's not borrow trouble, she said. These things are almost always nothing. You need to stay calm and not let them run you through every test in the book just to pad their numbers. I did not know then that this was only the beginning of what she would do. The oncologist appointment was in December, 3 weeks out. My husband and I went together. The oncologist, a direct, unhurried woman with reading glasses pushed up onto her head, reviewed my ultrasound, pressed on my abdomen herself, and told me she wanted a CT scan with contrast and, depending on what that showed, possibly a biopsy. She said the mass had characteristics that made her want more information before drawing any conclusions. I asked her to be honest with me. She said she appreciated that I asked. She said there were several things this could be, some of them benign, some of them not, and that the CT scan was the next right step. I scheduled the CT for 2 weeks out, January 3rd. My mother called me the night before. She had been talking to my father. They had, apparently, been discussing my situation at length, which I had not asked them to do. My father got on the phone. He had a careful voice. My father, the kind of voice that sounded reasonable right up until the moment it didn't. "We've been thinking," he said, "and we really feel like you're getting ahead of yourself here. Your mother looked some things up online, and solid masses in that location are very commonly benign cysts or fibroids, the kind of thing that gets watched, not treated. We think you should cancel the CT." I told him I was not going to cancel the CT. "The contrast dye they use in those scans is hard on the kidneys," he said. "Your mother read that. My oncologist ordered it. Oncologists order tests because that's their job," he said. "That's how they get paid. You go in there scared, and they run every scan in the building, and at the end of it, you've got a bill for $5,000 and a mass that was always just a cyst." "And if it's not a cyst?" I said. There was a pause. "You're 30 years old," my father said, as if my age were a counter-argument to disease. I went to the CT scan the next morning. I didn't tell them I'd had that phone call. I didn't tell my husband either, because I didn't want him to be angry on my behalf when I was trying to stay level. The results came back in 5 days. My oncologist called on a Friday afternoon. She said the CT had shown the mass in detail. It was solid, well-defined, with some internal vascularity. She said she wanted to do a core needle biopsy. She said we were going to find out exactly what this was. I wrote down everything she said in the Notes app on my phone. I looked at those words for a long time after I hung up. That night, I made the decision not to tell my parents about the biopsy. I told them the CT had come back, and the doctor was monitoring it. I used language that was technically true and strategically incomplete. I had never done that before with them. I had always believed that honesty inside a family was non-negotiable, but something had shifted in me during that phone call the night before the scan. Some internal threshold had been crossed. I had started to understand that their involvement in my medical care was not support. It was interference wearing the costume of concern. The biopsy was scheduled for the 3rd week of January. I took the day off work. My husband drove me there and waited in a chair in the hallway, reading a paperback he'd brought specifically because he knew it was going to be a long wait. The procedure itself was uncomfortable, but not unbearable. I lay still and breathed, and thought about the drive we'd taken to the lake the previous summer, the way the light had looked on the water in the early evening, and the technician said, "You're doing great," which I knew they always said, but which I still appreciated. We got home at 2 in the afternoon. I ate soup and watched something forgettable on TV, and fell asleep on the couch at 7. The results would take up to 10 business days. On the 6th day, my mother called. She had been asking me for updates, and I had been giving her the minimum, and I could feel her frustration building the way pressure builds before weather. "You've been very closed off," she said. I told her I was waiting for results, and I would let her know when I knew something. "Your father and I feel like you're shutting us out." "I'm not shutting you out. I'm waiting for information." "We're your parents," she said. "We have a right to know what's happening with our daughter's health." I want to stop here and explain something about my mother that took me a long time to understand. She did not experience my medical situation as something happening to me. She experienced it as something happening to the family, to her image of the family, to the story. And so her instinct, every time, was not to help me navigate it. It was to minimize it until it disappeared. The results came on a Thursday morning. My oncologist called before I left for work. The mass was a gastrointestinal stromal tumor, a GIST. She said this carefully, and then she said it again. She explained that GISTs are a type of soft tissue sarcoma. She said that the good news was that this one had characteristics: its size, its location, the specifics of what the pathology had shown that made it a candidate for surgical removal with strong outcomes. She said she wanted to connect me with a surgical oncologist that week. I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes after that call. I didn't cry. I just sat there and let the information settle into me the way cold water settles. Then I went inside and told my husband, and I cried then, and he held me for a long time without saying anything, except "We're going to handle this." I called my mother that afternoon. I told her everything. The diagnosis, the type, the surgical plan, the prognosis the oncologist had described. I was clear, and I was factual, and I was, by that point, completely numb to whatever she might say. She was quiet for longer than I expected. Then she said, "Are they sure? Because GISTs are very rare. How do they know it's not something else?" I told her the pathology report had been specific. "I'd want a second opinion before letting anyone cut me open," she said. I told her I would get one if my surgical oncologist recommended it. "I just think you're trusting these doctors very quickly," she said. "You don't know them. They have a financial incentive to recommend surgery." I felt something close and harden in my chest. I recognized it. I had felt it before, in smaller versions, throughout my entire life. But this time, it closed all the way. "I'm having the surgery," I said. "I'm telling you because you're my mother. Not because I'm asking for your opinion." She said, "You've always been so impulsive." I said goodbye and hung up. What happened next was something I could not have predicted. I found out through my sister, who was not involved and who was horrified, that my mother had called the surgical oncologist's office. She had identified herself as my emergency contact, which she was not. She had told the receptionist that I had a history of anxiety and medical phobia, and that my family had concerns about whether I was making this decision in a stable state of mind. She had asked them to call her before proceeding with any surgical scheduling. My sister heard this secondhand from our aunt, who my mother had told about it as though it were a reasonable thing to do. I found out on a Monday evening. I was standing in my kitchen, and my sister called me and told me, and I had to put the phone down and walk to the window and stand there and breathe for a while. Then I called the surgical oncologist's office first thing Tuesday morning. I spoke with the office manager. I told them that my mother was not my emergency contact, had never been listed as anyone in my medical file, and that any contact from her should be disregarded. I told them I was a 30-year-old adult, fully competent, and that my medical decisions were mine alone. The office manager was professional and kind, and said she completely understood, and that no action had been taken on the basis of my mother's call. I then sent my mother a text. I did not call, because I needed the words to be exact, and I needed a record of them. I wrote, "I know what you did. Do not contact my doctors again. Do not contact any of my medical providers in any capacity. If you do, I will involve an attorney. This is not a conversation. This is a boundary." She did not respond for 4 days. When she did, she wrote, "I was trying to protect you. I don't understand why you're treating me like an enemy." I did not respond to that. The surgery was scheduled for February 18th. My husband took 2 weeks off work. My closest friend, someone I had known since college, came and stayed with us for the first week of my recovery. I was surrounded by exactly the people I needed, and none of them were my parents. The procedure took 4 hours. The surgical team removed the tumor with clear margins. I woke up in the recovery room feeling like I had been emptied and slowly refilled, which is approximately what had happened. The surgeon came to see me that afternoon and said it had gone very well. She said the pathology on the removed tissue would confirm what we already knew, and that my follow-up plan would include regular imaging for the first several years, but that my prognosis was genuinely good. I cried again, in that hospital bed, but differently than before. Not from fear. From something closer to relief and rage mixed together: relief that it was out, rage that it had taken this long to get here, rage that there had been anyone in my life who had tried to stand between me and this moment. My father called while I was still in the hospital. He had found out through my sister. He said, "I hear the surgery went well." I said it did. He said, "Your mother has been very worried." I said, "She had a strange way of showing it." He said, "She loves you. She just handles things badly sometimes." I thought about everything I could say to that. The CT I almost didn't get. The biopsy I had hidden from them because I knew what they would do. The phone call to my doctor's office. The months of it's probably nothing, and they're just running up your bills and you're being impulsive. I said, "I know she loves me. That doesn't mean what she did was okay." He didn't have an answer for that. I was in the hospital for 3 days. Recovery at home took 6 weeks before I felt fully like myself. During that time, I did not see my parents. I spoke to my father once, briefly, and did not speak to my mother at all. In the quiet of those weeks, the slow days of healing, the afternoon light coming through the bedroom window, my cat asleep at the foot of the bed, I did a lot of thinking about the particular damage that gets done when the people who are supposed to protect you become the people you have to protect yourself from. It is a specific kind of grief. It doesn't announce itself cleanly. It arrives sideways, in the middle of ordinary moments, and it takes longer to name than most grief does. I started writing during that time. Not publicly, just in a document on my laptop, about what had happened, what I had felt, what I had learned, about the way my mother's voice had lived in my head for so long that I sometimes couldn't tell her doubts from my own, about the moment I had finally separated them. 3 months after my surgery, I was fully cleared by my oncologist. The margins were clean. The follow-up imaging was scheduled. I was, to the extent that word means anything, cancer-free. I went back to work. I made dinner with my husband. I took walks in the neighborhood in the early evening and noticed things the way the trees were starting to fill back in, the particular smell of spring in Ohio, the feeling of my own feet on the ground. I reached out to my mother in May. Not to reconcile fully, not to pretend that what had happened hadn't happened, but because I had decided that cutting her out entirely was not the thing I wanted. What I wanted was honesty and accountability and the possibility, not the guarantee of something different. We met for lunch at a place neither of us had strong feelings about. She looked tired. She looked older than I remembered, which I knew was just time, but which still caught me off guard. She said, "I'm sorry for the phone call to your doctor. I know that was wrong." It was the first time in my life I had heard her apologize without immediately following it with a but. I told her I accepted that, and that I needed her to understand it could never happen again. I told her that my medical decisions were mine, that my body was mine, that love does not mean control, and that if she couldn't hold that distinction, then our relationship would have to be kept at a significant distance. She nodded. She looked at her water glass. She said, "I was scared." I believed her. Fear is real. Fear doesn't excuse everything, but it explains some things, and I had decided I was willing to work with explanations even when I couldn't excuse. We didn't hug goodbye. We walked to our cars separately, and I sat in mine for a moment before starting it. I thought about the woman I'd been 7 months earlier, standing in a bathroom, pressing her fingers against her side, and trying to talk herself out of what she already knew. I thought about how close I had come to letting other people's fear override my own knowledge of my own body. I thought about every doctor's appointment I had kept anyway, every referral I had followed, every boundary I had finally drawn when I understood that no one else was going to draw it for me. I started the car. I have an imaging appointment every 6 months now. I put the dates on my calendar, and I circle them once. I go alone or with my husband, depending on the day, and I answer the technician's questions, and I breathe, and I wait for results the way I have learned to wait, present, honest, and without anyone else's voice telling me what my body is or isn't allowed to be. If you are reading this and you have felt something in your body that you know is real, and anyone has told you that you're overreacting, that you're anxious, that doctors are just trying to make money, that it's probably nothing, please hear me when I say that you are the only person who lives inside your body. You are the only one who knows what normal feels like for you. No one's comfort, no one's fear, no one's need to keep things small and simple and fine gets to override that. Advocate for yourself. Keep the appointment. Get the scan. Ask the question you're afraid to ask. You don't need anyone's permission to know that something is wrong.